Every writer knows that the best conversations about writing don't happen in classrooms or symposia or any fancy artisanal setting. They happen at the bar, usually after deadline. That's the vibe we're going for here. This is The Other 51, a podcast about writing with me, Brian Moritz. This week, my guest is Dr. Jennifer Harker from West Virginia University, and we talk about, among other things, her award-winning study on the Alliance of American Football. Jennifer, first of all, thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about stuff.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
It is. This is another one, just like our previous episode here. This was supposed to be recorded in Toronto at the AEJMC conference, but Apple screwed me over with this whole dongle situation, and you got to travel with like 8 things to record. So, but we ended up having we should have mic'd ourselves while we were walking around that mall in Toronto.
I agree. We should have. We had a great discussion about ketchup Lay's potato chips.
Oh, they are so good. Did you get some while you were there? Did you actually get some?
I did. Brought a package home.
What did you think?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Excellent.
You didn't lead me in the wrong direction. Thank you.
Canadian snack food is really important to me, and I would not change that. So, anyway, so we could talk about Canadian snack food all day, but I do want to talk about one of the reasons you were at AEJMC, and it was your award-winning paper that you won in the sports interest group. Before we get to that, though, I asked Mark Coddington, who I had on, who I also talked with at AEJ, about this. What's your whole take on the conference setup and on academic conferences? Are you a fan of them, and what's your favorite part of them? Like, how do you, especially since you're kind of new to academia and newish to not being in grad school, how's your view of them changing, and what's it like?
Oh, that is a loaded question, Brian. Let me see. I think, first of all, I would say AEJMC is hands down my favorite conference. And that's probably because of the topical focus, because it's just my area and what I'm passionate about, because I love journalism and I love sport communication, and it's a great marriage of both, in my opinion. I will say that whenever I was finishing up grad school and going out on the job market, it was the connections I made at these conferences that really helped my opportunities to come to fruition, if you will. So I think that academic conferences are a really great way for us to get out of our silos and our introspective research norms, if you will, because it is a very personal and individual process in a lot of ways. It's a great way for us to kind of break free from that and see what everybody else is doing, what's important to other people in your space, and just to learn from others. It's also, I think, a little challenging in our academic publishing timelines. That has been something that I'm still learning how to navigate, because our publishing timelines are so lengthy, and it is difficult sometimes to be fully trusting to put our research out there before it is published. And so there's kind of a delicate balance there that I would be so open to hearing more discussion on. So I'm glad that you are talking about it.
Yeah, and that is an interesting part of it. So for the non-academics listening to this, the way our publishing in our conference system works is like you have a deadline to submit to a conference. So let's say it's April 1st for AEJMC. I think that's the deadline. Yes. And you have to have your paper submitted to the interest group, and then it gets picked within the next month, and then you present in August. But then at the same time, you have when you're trying to get something published, it's very open-ended most times. You don't have the deadline of submit by a next day to get in a journal. It's a very fluid process. It's a very long process. It can be months or years before you hear feedback or you get an answer on it. And it is challenging because the traditional step you take is you go submit a paper to a conference, present it there. You presumably get some good feedback either from the people at the organizers of the conference or the people that you meet, and you talk about it, and then you take take that, refine it, and you send it out to publication. And that just gets challenging because, like you said, you present your conference findings and you don't want somebody to kind of steal that, quick replicate it, or like take that as their own, or like beat you to take your idea, really, I think is the big idea. Is the big fear,
Yeah.
and to take that and to get a quick publication and to publish it before you do. That's a real, especially for us junior faculty, where like publications, like we were talking before we started recording about how important they are. Like that's a real, I think that's an interesting challenge to it.
It is. And then the blind review process as well, because now you've just put a face to the content, and it becomes not so blinded. Sometimes we can figure out whose research is who because we know our areas and all of that, and it's not always completely blind, but keeping it as blind as possible is important to the overall integrity of our academic work. But that is also this whole concept and these things to think about is also one of the reasons why I really, really enjoy being part of the sport communication interest group, because if you are lucky enough to be awarded top paper, it is an automatic acceptance into our partner journal, the Journal of Sports Media. And that is just, I can't even say as a junior scholar how beneficial that is to me. Winning a top paper award, plus getting that acceptance to present at the conference, plus getting the publication. It's the perfect trifecta, if you will.
It really is. I mean, that's a huge benefit of our interest group, and it's not very super common, I don't think, in academia. But that does lead us to a nice segue to talk about your paper. I want to go through the research you did and kind of the process you have in doing the paper. And your paper is entitled #Join the Alliance. I always like getting the hashtag in the title. A network exploration into #brand building by an emerging sports league. And it was really interesting. You took the now defunct, I believe, Alliance
Yes.
of American Football, which is really funny reading this and about how effective they were at using hashtags, and then the league folded like 6 weeks in. That's actually funny. What was that like for you? You do this work on it, and then all of a sudden the league just up and tanks on you.
Well, interestingly, so back the end of last calendar year, I had noticed that they were emerging on social media, and I recognized that they were doing a really great job using hashtags. And so I thought, man, this would be a really great thing to study. They're emerging on social media. We really haven't had this opportunity in sport communication to look at something like this in the past. So there is a software that is usable within social network analysis, and I wanted to get to know it better and its usability better. So I thought that this would be a perfect opportunity to kind of enhance my learning of the program as well as conduct a study. So I collected data every single day, starting on January 1st. And the data that's included in the paper submitted to AEJ is data all the way through March 31st, submitted on April 1st. So I did the data analysis and then quickly wrote up the results and finished up the discussion to send it in, which was an interesting undertaking.
I was going to say, speaking of deadline, that's a 1 day turnaround on results and discussion. So did you wait to do any analysis until that last day, or did you do like some preliminary stuff so you had an idea of what maybe you were looking at?
I did wait till that last day, but I was collecting it every day. And every day that I collected it, I was going through several steps. So I was collecting it using the hashtag Join the Alliance. So it was everything connected to that hashtag. And I really was interested in seeing kind of the social construction of how people would start identifying with this league by using secondary hashtags along with it. So I would run a sentiment analysis and frequency analyses and things like that with the hashtags in particular, using the NodeXL software. And so I was kind of working along every day as I went. So I knew I had a really good finger on the pulse of it. Mm-hmm. So I kind of knew what was going on and how it was formulating, if you will.
So we'll kind of back up to the ideation process on this. I'm always curious at where studies come from. You said you kind of
Sure.
noticed it, or that you noticed the association and their Twitter presence kind of organically on your own.
Yes.
Okay. And so where you kind of touched on this already, but just kind of walk me through. I mean, it seems like to me the value in a study, the real value in a study like this, not to diminish anything else you found, but this is one of the first times you get to see, like we've seen studies of sports leagues and teams and use of social media for a decade now, but this is the first time we really see it. Like the league is starting fresh. It's not the NBA that's established or the NFL that's established. It's a league that's really starting like as a blank piece of paper. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes, absolutely. This offered an opportunity to just kind of monitor and observe how people build an identification with this emerging league and each of its 8 teams.
Mm-hmm. So what are some of the key findings from your study?
So some of the key findings was one that was really, I felt interesting because of, as we just discussed, how this is a brand new league. There was league rivalry that was being discussed a lot. And then after they folded, which was literally 2 days after the AEJMC deadline. Thank goodness I got it done when I did.
Right.
When they folded, the AAF in particular really took that ball and ran with it, pun intended, as far as really trumping up the league rivalry and how whenever they relaunch next season, XFL is relaunching in 2020. They, talked about how they won't go out after just one season, even though they already had done that in 2001. So it was interesting to watch the banter for sure. But that was one of the big things that came through. I separated it into 3 different time periods. So it was pre-launch, so before they played their first game, and then it was during the launch period, whenever they kicked off their inaugural season for the AAF. And then the third time period was kind of post-kickoff, if you will, so the whole month of March. And it was really... it was interesting to watch the conversations that would occur, how it was connecting to the other major league sports. People were really wanting to connect to at the league level in their conversations, which was so interesting. And then third, how identification was in fact building amongst people who were discussing AAF through these secondary hashtags that emerged. And I will say that a little caveat here is that hashtags don't typically lend themselves to sentiment. We don't usually see much emotion, maybe, like emotive words really in hashtags, but sometimes people do use hashtags that do indicate some sort of sentiment. And so whenever the program was able to pick up sentiment, I also analyzed that. And so it was, there was a lot of rivalry that would come up, which is negative sentiment. But actually, that kind of negative sentiment, whenever it's rivalry that is emerging, is actually quite positive in sport communication. So it's, just knowing those nuances whenever you're looking at this data makes it pretty exciting to get to watch it as it unfolds. The other thing is about the identification piece of this is that people started attaching to the winning team, which was a Florida team, who went nearly undefeated. Arizona Hotshots beat them in this big upset of a game. And so that was a big deal on social media as well when that happened. Again, some rivalry stuff happening there. But there were some hashtags that were emerging that showed, beat such and such team, or we are the Alliance instead of join the Alliance and things like that, or we are Birmingham, which was one of the teams. So it was pretty neat to see how successful teams, people were willing to attach themselves to that, which we know that from the sport communication and identification literature. But it was interesting to watch that grow as the league continued play.
When you say a lot of the stuff was happening at the league level, just to dig into that a little bit, do you mean like people were connecting with the Alliance like as a whole rather than like one specific team to start with?
So I think that it wasn't so much that they were connecting, so much as it was they were introspective maybe about how they were going to survive as a league up against the MLBs and the NBAs and the NFLs of the world. A lot of that was being connected to those discussions. So it would have hashtag join the alliance or hashtag AAF along with hashtag NBA. And so, and some of the collegiate connections were about players that they were recruiting and things like that. And the teams all had their own hashtags, which were also being connected. But for the most part, it was questioning whether or not the league was even going to survive. And then also there was a lot of banter about the XFL relaunching in 2020, and they would be their direct competition had the AAF remained operating.
Right. So, I mean, we remember, of course, the AAF launch and had this huge opening weekend, just an absolutely massive and pretty good in terms of TV ratings and kind of like sports conversation and all. What did you find kind of around that, like right around that time in terms of your findings? Was there anything that stood out about that, or that like peaked and then really plummeted after that?
Well, what peaked was negative sentiment, which was interesting. But again, that was more based on rivalry. And then things started evening out a bit, and you started seeing a lot of positive sentiment about the league overall. I would only say that they were smart to kind of position themselves just in between collegiate football and professional football. By saying that they would be kind of a feeder league to the NFL, and they were giving this in-between space to collegiate players. I think people really were positive about attaching to that, like they were doing good for these athletes, if you will.
So looking at it from as you were seeing the data come across, I mean, were you surprised when they announced that they were folding? You said 2 days after the deadline, and obviously they fold for various business reasons, and there's been some great reporting out on that.
Yes.
But from what you had just kind of been observing social media wise, did it surprise you at all that they folded?
I can't say that it surprised me. I mean, the NFL is just a mammoth, and people are just so deeply, deeply identified with the NFL that I think anybody who tries to get into that space is going to have just a myriad of challenges that would be very, very difficult to overcome. That being said, I think that people are also kind of ready to see something new too. So I was very, very hopeful for them. However, I think that, and I'm going to offer a pre-disclaimer here, that I am probably the biggest proponent of paid media models and media subscriptions. But I think that they moved to that too early for broadcasting their games. They just had too many paywalls to be able to interact with their games. And being a brand new league, I don't think that was a positive thing for them.
Well, that's interesting. It dovetails some of the things I'm working on and writing on about The Athletic, and we've had numerous conversations in Twitter threads and Twitter messages about The Athletic. But what I'm kind of figuring out now is what The Athletic's success in that right now, early on, was establishing legitimacy very early on. That gets into organizational sociology, into that field, and they kind of had that legitimacy right away, where you were willing to pay $5 a month that first year because Tim Kawakami joins in, or because the letters were an agent of that, or whatever. And then, and it sounds to me, and I can see this both from what you're saying and just kind of as a casual observer of this, the alliance didn't have that legitimacy to bring people in to convince them that it was worth paying for.
That is correct. In addition to that, what I think compounds that is the fact that they had so many media partners. So it was some were being broadcast by NFL TV, for example. So it's, they're not going to go and piecemeal their subscriptions, probably just watch the games that they already hold subscriptions to, or not watch them at all.
Okay. So getting back to this writing process, because you wrote this paper in a day. That's not what we normally do in this in this racket. So how'd you pull that off?
Well, again, it goes back to collecting that data every day. So I knew it so well by the time I um, really needed to get it finalized on paper and out the door. And I put so much thought to it, so much work into it up to that point that it kind of wrote itself, honestly. But I am a parent, and um, luckily I have the most wonderful and supportive husband. I said, honey, I have 30 hours to get this paper complete and turned in. Can you give me the support I need for this? And he's like, I've got your back. And he just brought me food and coffee regularly, and he took care of all of the kids' needs over the 2 days that I was at it. So I just kind of just went at it. I would not ever advise this, like ever.
Right. That is.
Luckily, it happened to fall on days that I was not teaching, and I had the time, in a quiet office space to be able to do it. But yeah, it's not how I would normally work.
Right. It is. I mean, these are 20 to 30 page papers that we're piecing together here. That's a lot to do in a day. But you bring up such a great point on the collecting data regularly and being familiar with it. I've done a lot of interview data and ethnography study in my work, and transcribing interviews, which is the single worst thing anybody can do in the history of the world.
Yes.
But it's the same idea that once you've transcribed the interviews and put in that gobs of time, when you sit down to write, you've got it all. Like, the data, what you're writing, and that just becomes, I think, such an important tool, because not only can you write fast, but you can write better because you're so intimately familiar with what you're doing.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. And I think, I learned some strategies too, just over the years and after writing, a dissertation and all that. I think that you kind of learn to come into your own as a writer in these situations whenever you've been able to immerse yourself in the topic and, the areas that surround your main topic. You become well versed in that, and you know which sources to reach to, and some of the authors that you should just look straight to their work for, and things like that. But I think you also learn some strategies. And so for me, I have to be very disciplined in outlining first before I write. And then I have to be very disciplined in allowing myself enough editing time to do a reverse outline process where I'm like, what is the topic of this paragraph? And is every sentence in this paragraph on that topic? Because I tend to get way ahead of myself and go from A to Z in one paragraph. And so I have to really pull myself back and pay attention to that. So I tend to just write. And then I'll go back and reverse outline and edit and restructure.
So I'm fascinated by this idea of reverse outlining. Can you talk about it a little bit more?
Sure. I probably learned it from some friends on Twitter, again, with the academic writing stuff that people talk about there. But it's been a great tool for me where I will take, for example, I'll take my introduction and I'll just look at the first sentence and just jot down a note on another Word document or on a piece of paper. Here's the topic. And I'll do that for all of the paragraphs in the introduction. And then I'll go back to that first paragraph and I'll read each sentence and specifically see if it relates to that overarching topic of that first sentence. And if it doesn't, then I know I need to do some restructuring.
Okay. And that sounds like a lengthy process. I mean, helpful, but is that a lengthy process, or do you kind of get rolling with it?
You do get rolling with it. It becomes quicker and easier as you practice it and go along. But like I said before, my mind tends to go way too fast and I'll get way off topic. So I have to keep myself in check that way. I think we all have our little quirky things about us like that. There are probably people who can write, probably most people, aside from me, who can write these beautiful, eloquent, totally adhered together perfectly paragraphs. But that's not me as a writer. So I have to really keep myself in check for that. So I have to allow myself that editing time in my writing process.
What are some of the other strategies that you had? You mentioned kind of dedicating time to write, but what else do you have?
Yeah, so well, during the academic year, I keep 2 writing days. And on those writing days, I write first thing in the morning, after the kids are up and at school and all of that. I write first thing in the morning, and then I take a break for a couple of hours, and I can usually get one more good, solid writing session in the afternoon as well. And then I'm done with writing. If I want to go back to it again that evening or something like that, then that's only editing and restructuring. So I keep my writing hours to a very specific time because those are the hours that I feel like my brain is on coffee and working well enough through the thought processes. The other thing that I do is I try to stay active whenever I'm doing my writing processes. So there's 2 things that I do. One is I have a PDF reader on my phone. So you can upload a PDF in this app and it'll read it to you out loud.
Oh, neat.
So this is a lot of times how I'll do some of my final editing process is by going out for a run and listening to my whole manuscript. So I can kind of give that higher level thought to it and really zoom out. And it's really, really good process because you cannot make any edits. So you have to get used to it because, we all like to make the edits when we're reading it, seeing it and hearing it. But this is a really beneficial process to me. The other thing is I walk or I pedal while I write. So I have a Fit desk, which is like a stationary bike that has a desk on it. So you can sit and pedal. I also have a treadmill with a desk attachment on it so that I can walk while I write. And those things keep me going and keep me engaged in the work.
Huh. The PDF, the listening to a PDF and not being able to edit, that's got to be that's really interesting because it would seem to take away that urge we all have as writers to tinker. Which is useful, yes. Like you said, making sure the paragraphs fit and everything, but also kind of I think you mentioned this. It's kind of like the big picture read. So not just is this word right or is this comma right, which is important, but that step back and overall, am I hitting the notes I want to hit here? Am I making the point that I want to make rather than it's kind of like seeing the forest, not the trees.
Yes, it is exactly that. It is a very, very helpful piece to my research because it really does help me to get that just broader view. And I always come back with changes that are necessary and that I'm glad that I caught because I know that a reviewer would have.
Mm-hmm. So I ask everybody I have on my podcast this question. So I will ask you, what is the best thing that you've read lately?
Ooh, oh my. Probably Becoming from Michelle Obama.
Okay.
Yes.
So what about that book, aside from, our political love aside, what about that book it struck you with it? It stuck with you?
It's just so inspiring. I think that, here's my big thing. I think that all of us have our own story and our own story to tell. And it really doesn't matter how big of a title we've had attached to our name. Or how small of a title we have attached to our name. I think we all have a story and we all are unique, beautiful people. And I think that celebrating that is really, really important. And celebrating that process of becoming is very, very important.
Great. Well, Jen, this has been wonderful catching up with you again, even though we're not walking around a Toronto mall. And it's been great. Look forward to seeing you again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much.
As always, thanks for listening to The Other 51. You can find show notes for this episode and all our episodes at sportsmediaguy.com on the Other 51 tab. You can subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. I can highly recommend Overcast for this. Our theme music is by Ellie Moritz.